Hey, welcome back. It's a Thirsty Thursday edition of Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John Tobacco, coming to you today from the Newsmax headquarters high atop Midtown Manhattan. And joining us now, we have Sam Spokony. Sam is a political strategist with Marathon Strategies. And right here in New York, we have all kinds of crazy things going on, but the Dow Jones is up 400 points today. I think maybe a little bit because people, the fears are ceasing a little about a all-out trade war. We know some of the tariffs have gone into effect. They may go up, but China said they want to have a calm discussion about it. What say you about the trade war with China?
What you said is true. I think, some other things remain true, which is that, I think we've seen for a while that a lot of people are suffering from the tariffs. We've heard a lot from farmers and how they've reacted to kind of the support that President Trump has sent to Middle America to try to reason with them. I think the reality is also that the tariffs have had a significant amount of negative impacts across a number of other sectors, including construction, building, anybody who's using steel, anybody who's using Chinese products. They're suffering right now, and the real question right now is not just how President Trump is going to handle this with China, but carrying over to the Democratic primary. How are Democrats going to try to leverage this to exploit some weaknesses with regard to the economy? Even if the Dow's up right now, the reality is that I think we've heard behind the scenes that President Trump is concerned with how things are looking. The economy's been his strongest talking point to date. And I think there's opportunities for Democrats to, find a middle ground between poking some holes in to some degree, the question of whether Trump is handling the economy well, but also straddling the line between going too far and alienating some voters in some key battleground states who, frankly, might sympathize and agree with the way President Trump has gotten tough on China.
So, Sam, let's talk about the politics of trade a little bit. One of the things we saw in 2016 is both Donald Trump in the Republican primary and Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary make the trade issue, especially the TPP, a huge political issue, irrespective of the economic merits of free trade or fair trade. Bernie Sanders rode enthusiasm against that TPP deal almost as far as Trump was able to ride it in the Republican primary. Trade has not been a huge focus in the Democratic primaries, at least in the debate so far. Why do you think that is? And then who do you expect to carve out that middle ground on the issue of China?
Well, to your second question, I think it might be too early to say, or at least it's tough to say. I think to the first question, the answer, to some degree, is that the Democratic Party is still kind of battling for its soul, and they're fighting over, some internecine progressive issues. To some degree, it's a test of who can be the most progressive. And what you lose in that discussion is, to some degree, going back to the basics of the economy. And I think that's why some folks who have been looking at the Democratic primary have said, maybe it's worth talking a little bit more and trying to hammer on some of the emerging weaknesses with the Trump
campaign. Do we know where any of the Democratic candidates are on the trade issue, on the China tariff issue right now at this point? I mean, I follow this stuff pretty closely. I couldn't tell you what Bernie Sanders' position is or Joe Biden.
Bernie was quite in line with Trump at some point on some of this stuff.
Right, other than what you've just laid out in terms of what's been written and said well in the past, we really haven't heard much about this. In terms of the Democratic debates thus far, by virtue of both, the significant debates about health care within the Democratic Party, a number of other issues, and the questions they've been asked at those debates, it's really tough to tell from a public standpoint who feels what way and why.
And in terms of the farmers that you alluded to that are getting hurt by this, even with the bailout from the government, have we seen any sort of erosion of support for the president from the farmers or people in rural communities so far?
I mean, what we've seen is anecdotal. I think some would argue that the answer is a definite yes. Some would push back on that. But what we've seen on the ground is, obviously we've seen a lot of coverage over the past couple of weeks, one, noting that the Trump administration sees this as a problem. They've sent reinforcements out to engage with farmers across Middle America. And number two, we've seen based on the reporting that hasn't gone that well. There's been, those meetings haven't gone well. The town halls that have been held with farmers, they've received a lot of criticism, a lot of boos, a lot of negativity. So again, the question is for the Democrats, I think, will you take the time rather than continuing to debate for the progressive soul of the party, while that may be a really important issue in terms of a primary? When do you start to toe the line and start to straddle really tackle the issue of the economy and go after what may be, in the end, we may be talking 6 months from now, that this was the greatest weakness for the Trump camp heading into 2020. So who's going to be first?
So I heard you mention in there that at these town halls there's a lot of booze.
Yeah.
Like Question Tequila, Bonzoni, because I might want to go to one of
Probably
these
not quite as much as you have on set right now.
Not this type of booze.
Probably not quite as much booze per se as you have on set right now, but
right.
yeah.
But, I'm joking, but what I want to ask you is this: we talked a little earlier in the show about some of these polls out there, with 20 months out or whatever, and that the polls really matter. But some of the more left-wing university polls seem to be skewed like crazily. Every candidate beats Trump, apparently, in a head-to-head. And this recent Quinnipiac poll says the top 5, Kamala, Biden, Sanders, Warren, Kamala, even Buttigieg, they all beat Trump in a head-to-head. And I kind of debunked the numbers, how that's not really true, because they use this skewed methodology. But what they don't tell you on the left-wing media is 70% of likely registered voters said that the U.S. economy was either good or great. And you don't hear that a lot on the other side. When Frank's talking about how do the farmers feel and stuff, what do you, like, I think that's the main issue. 20 months out, 6 months out, 2 months out, the economy's good, people feel good.
Yeah, but I think as with a number of other issues, everything's great until it's not. And I think what we've heard anecdotally are there are cracks starting to form. I think people are noticing. I do, feel like to some degree in terms of the polls you reference, I do think it's fair to say that once you have a significant number of polls saying the same thing, it's worth noting. And I do think it's clear based on what we've seen in terms of what's reported about the White House and the conversations that have taken place. It's just not accurate to say that the Trump administration doesn't see this as an issue, because they have. They wouldn't be sending out reinforcements. They wouldn't be trying to cover their base a little bit more in this issue if they didn't see it as a problem. And again, it just all goes back to the dynamic of all of this could change if there are Democratic candidates who are willing to step up a little bit more and speak a little bit more publicly. I mean, we've seen a lot of multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar plans on a number of hot-button progressive issues. If and when the time comes when there's that full-throated discussion taking place in the Democratic primary, I feel like, again, it goes back to everything's great until it's not. And if there are folks who are making that case publicly, you could see things change.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. It was some very insightful commentary. I wanted to get to the Brexit stuff, but we're out of time. Sam Spokony, thank you very much for joining us. He's with Marathon Strategies, and we're going to have him back to talk to you as we get closer and closer to the election on what's going on out there. You're watching Liquid Lunch. We'll be back in just a few minutes.